On a warm August morning, clear sky above the coast of Normandy announced the start of a pleasant summer's day. Some 5,000 inhabitants of the port town of Harfleur, located close to the mouth of the river Seine, started their daily routines. By noon, French fishermen dotted the open sea, casting their nets just off the coast, when a horrifying sight appeared on the horizon. A vast array of ships heading south across the Channel. The anticipated English invasion had finally come. And if you're a fan of medieval history, check out the Knights mini-series on CuriosityStream about the journey of knights through ambushes, sieges, and their deeds on the battlefield that turned them into legends that live on to this day. Our friends over at CuriosityStream partnered with us for this video, and as their long-time subscriber, I recommend their history documentaries where you can find topics from ancient, medieval, and more modern times. But if you're interested in other topics, CuriosityStream is a streaming service that features thousands of some of the best, highest quality educational documentaries out there. And as our viewer, you get a special 40% discount on a yearly subscription if you sign up before January the 3rd. Visit curiositystream.com/HistoryMarche to get unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and non-fiction series for only $11.99 a year. That's just $1 a month. And use the code HistoryMarche when you sign up to get 40% off your yearly subscription. And by signing up on CuriosityStream, you'll also be supporting our channel. Happy holidays! The great victories at Henrici and Poitiers had brought vast expanses of French territory under the English crown. This apparently endless war that began in 1337 was fought over English claims to the French throne and various English possessions within France. But in the years since, most of these lands were lost through a lack of determined initiative and the distraction of dynastic squabbles at home, as well as the dark legacy of the Black Death that disrupted the social fabric of most of Europe. By the early 15th century, only a patchwork of French territories were still under English control. And now, in 1413, the 26-year-old Prince Henry V became the new King of England. Having inherited the throne from his father, who overthrew the prior King Richard II, Henry's position as ruler was far from secure in the early years of his reign, as sections of the nobility viewed him as the son of a usurper. Conspiracies soon arose against him. Although uncovered and ruthlessly suppressed, the political discord and tension between the nobility and the royal house was laid bare. Nevertheless, Henry saw an opportunity to both further reassert his authority at home and realize his ambitious plans abroad by looking across the Channel. France faced its own political crisis. King Charles VI's insanity weakened the kingdom, leaving the affairs of the state unattended, resulting in a power struggle among the nobility. This was the perfect moment for Henry to press his claims. He not only demanded Aquitaine and the lands ceded to the English at the Treaty of Bretigny, but also laid claim to former Angevin holdings of Brittany, Normandy, Maine, Anjou, and Touraine, as well as Flanders, which has never been in English hands. In addition, the French were to pay the outstanding 1.6 million crowns from the ransom of John II, captured at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, and Henry would get Princess Catherine's hand in marriage, King Charles' young daughter, along with a dowry of 2 million crowns. For some perspective, the price of a war horse would have been around 80 crowns. So the total amount of 3.6 million that Henry asked for could buy 45,000 war horses, an amount close to $550 million in today's money. In return, the English king would renounce his claim to the French throne, inherited from his great-grandfather Edward III, who was a maternal grandson of the former French king Philippe IV. Unsurprisingly, the government of King Charles, dysfunctional as it was, would not concede to such astronomical demands, instead offering a dowry of 600,000 crowns and an enlarged Aquitaine. The English saw this counteroffer as an insult, claiming that the French had mocked their claims and ridiculed the king himself. Henry seemingly believed that his claims were just, and in his mind, if he could not get justice, he would take by force what rightfully belonged to him. True to form, his preparations for war started long before negotiations with Charles broke down in June 1415. The wily English king used the protracted talks to secure the support, or at least the neutrality, of John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, which would deprive the French coast of maritime protection. And on August 11th, with fair wind, the English fleet set sail for France. The first objective was Harfleur. The fortified port had long been a thorn in England's side, serving as a base for frequent raids along the south coast. Capturing it would thereby reduce the threat against English ports and would serve as a vital base of operations into France, along with Calais, situated further up the coast. On the afternoon of August 14th, King Henry's army landed near the mouth of the river Seine. Upon landing in Normandy, the decision was made to surround the town and cut off possible reinforcements and supplies. Henry's brother, Thomas, Duke of Clarence, was sent to block off the eastern approach, while the king remained to deploy the main body of the army. Siege weapons and 12 guns had to be brought closer to the walls to be effective against Harfleur's strong defences. The town, with its 5,000 inhabitants, was protected by 4.5-metre thick walls, water defences, and 24 towers, with a well-defended port and a garrison of 250 men. In his message, Henry demanded surrender, attempting to instill fear in the minds of the populace by citing a biblical law that gave him the right to put the townsfolk to the sword if they refused to yield, due to his right to the French throne. Meanwhile, as Thomas advanced to surround the town on the landward side, a relief force appeared. 300 French men-at-arms rode with haste towards the gates, under the command of Raoul de Gaucourt. Although a small retinue, the presence of these professional soldiers would stiffen the resolve of the populace. Determined to resist the invading army, the French closed the sluice gates to inundate the valley to the north. Harfleur would not yield to Henry's demands for surrender. Soon after, the English siege train unleashed hell on the town. Over the course of a few days, the bombardment inflicted significant damage to the walls and towers, with some projectiles reaching buildings in the middle of the town. The threat of death from above became a daily occurrence for the inhabitants. But the townsfolk and soldiers responded, manning the guns on the walls and bulwarks. They harassed and inflicted heavy losses on Henry's irreplaceable teams of gunners and siege engine crews, who had to get close to the walls to be effective, thereby placing themselves in a vulnerable position well within reach of the French. At night, the resilient defenders made frantic repairs to their damaged defences, much to the astonishment and frustration of the English besiegers. And by early September, some 15 days into the siege, the summer heat turned the water in the flooded valley to the north into a stagnant and foul, disease-infested swamp. As the siege dragged on with little progress, dysentery began ravaging the English army. The dire situation forced Henry to adopt urgent measures. He ordered mines to be dug under the walls, intending to collapse the tunnels to undermine the town's defenses. However, his mining crews were frustrated by counter-tunnels dug by the French. The stubborn townsfolk would tunnel their way to intercept and damage the English works and attack their crews, sabotaging all attempts to undermine the town's walls. Above ground, the English king ordered the wooden towers to be brought up against the wall to launch an assault on the town. But by this time, the siege went on for a month. Although not lengthy by medieval standards, it required more time and resources than Henry anticipated. Unsanitary conditions, polluted water supplies, and, as suggested by a contemporary chronicler, bad effects of unripe fruit, grapes, and shellfish sapped the English army. And having thousands of men, horses, and other animals in close proximity, along with the waste they produced, created conditions that were ripe for infections. The outbreak of dysentery caused the death of many, while many more fell ill. Earls, knights, esquires, and archers alike were incapacitated, with many granted permission to return by ship to England to recover once the siege was over. However, reports of dysentery in Harfleur indicated that the siege began taking its toll on the town as well. But, despite privations, bombardment, and disease, the defenders rallied, launching a sortie on the English siege works. Led by Gaucourt, the French men-at-arms set fire to Henry's siege bastion before retreating to the safety of the defences. The English now faced the prospect of a prolonged stay under the walls of Harfleur. For Henry, it was now or never. The king launched a desperate assault on the bulwarks outside the main gate, supported by a constant rain of arrows. English bowmen managed to set fire to one of the towers using flammable arrows, which gave the dismounted men-at-arms the upper hand. Fierce fighting ensued as the French attempted to drive the English back. But the invaders took control of the gate fortifications, forcing the defenders to retreat into the town. On the following day, the king demanded surrender for the second time. Again, he was rejected. Frustrated, Henry sounded the trumpets for the troops to prepare a full assault, ordering the remaining guns to maintain a steady bombardment and not allow the defenders any sleep. Frightened of the prospect of the town being taken by storm, with the biblical law permitting the slaughter of the inhabitants if they refused to surrender, sections of the population wavered. Although he was determined to take the town by storm, Henry was relieved when the defenders agreed to open negotiations. Talks continued for 2 days until, on September the 18th, town officials agreed to yield Harfleur if no relief force came by September 23rd. Raoul de Gaucourt sent messages out, but received word that the French army had not yet gathered enough troops to give battle. No help would come. With no other choice, the Lord of Gaucourt surrendered the town on September 22nd. After Harfleur had capitulated, leading members of the defending garrison were set free on the condition that they gave themselves up as prisoners at Calais. English officials were placed in charge of the town, allowing the French inhabitants to remain if they swore an oath of fealty to Henry, while the rest were expelled. The invaders, meanwhile, incurred heavy losses. A third of the English army was either dead or incapacitated. Henry now had roughly 7,100 troops left at his disposal. After resting the men for a few weeks, the king garrisoned the town with 300 men-at-arms and 900 archers, before marching out into the rolling countryside of Normandy with 900 men-at-arms and 5,000 archers. Credit goes to our awesome patrons who make videos like this one possible. Consider joining them to support our work. You can also support us by subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell button to get notified when our new videos are released. And as always, thank you for watching.